What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and it is that time of year once again where we're going to go over year-end lists. This is a time I both look forward to and dread, just because whittling down the list of awesome music that I have listened to this year down to 40 releases is a task every time. And this year was especially trying because I just feel like this year had just a litany of killer releases. So I've been working on this list for the better part of a month and a half, which was problematic because other releases were coming out, and there were some later releases that snuck on my list just because they were so damn good. And honestly, I feel like we reviewed even more albums this year. Like, there was just a constant flow of albums all year long, especially towards the back half, like around late August, all the way through, I would say, like a good chunk of November. There were just big release after big release, and yeah, no, this was a hell of a year. And if you're a death metal fan, I would say like this was kind of a banner year because we had a lot of killer old school bands come out with new stuff, as well as new bands putting out, killer releases as well. So we're going to get started on this one. This is 40 through 26 here, and we're going to start off a little bit different. I'm going to do something I haven't done, I don't think, on any of these lists. I'm going to start off with some honorable mentions, and my honorable mentions are specific for a reason because, well, they didn't necessarily fit as a new release, but they kind of did, but they needed to be mentioned anyway. So we're going to start off with some re-recordings. My first honorable mention is Voivod, Morgoth Tales. Now, generally, I don't care for re-recordings, but this band did a almost kind of like cool tribute. They essentially recorded a song from every album that they did with Piggy. And honestly, with the lineup they have right now, I think it was a really cool idea because you get these fresh takes on old songs. They did an incredible job. I really just enjoyed listening to this entire thing because not only was it nostalgic, but it was kind of cool hearing like a consistent recording across the board in terms of the production, because I've really liked their production here lately. Hearing their more current sound applied to like older songs like Thrashing Rage, Killing Technology, I absolutely love that song. Pre-Ignition, Fix My Heart, which I still think Outer Limits is like a great, like kind of deep cut album that I think people kind of overlook that one. Anyway, I'll go into like a Voivod tangent if I keep talking about this too long. But yeah, this was absolutely amazing, and you did get one new track on here with Morgoth Tales, which is fantastic, and once again gets me psyched for future Voivod releases. Anyway, this is a fantastic compilation, re-recording, I don't know what do we call this, but honestly, as we said in our review, I think this would be a good one to throw to prospective Voivod fans, just because this is a good sampler platter of all they do. And honestly, with the cleaner production, this might actually get them to check out the older albums. But yeah, I absolutely love this, and this was one of my honorable mentions. And my other two are the Cavalera re-recordings of Bestial, Devastation, and Morbid Visions. Oh my god. These are absolutely fantastic. Again, the whole re-recording thing, generally I'm not a fan of, but I think these were two special cases in my mind, just because the originals, while they are instrumental in terms of the evolution of extreme metal, like it's almost proto-death metal or blackened thrash, the recordings were so rough. The guitars were out of tune, the drums were out of time. But Max and Igor were super young, they had all the vigor and the tenacity, but they didn't quite have all the skill yet. I think coming back to these and reapproaching them as more seasoned musicians, like these songs really just absolutely explode now. There's a little bit more of a death thrash vibe to it overall, and I think Arthur Risk's production on here is absolutely fantastic. Max has been working with him quite a bit, and I can see why he gets great results out of him. It still sounds raw, it still sounds visceral, but it's much more cleaned up. And again, the fact that they are reapproaching these old songs as seasoned musicians and coming back to them with the same amount of tenacity, like nothing is lost in here. In fact, I think this gained some additional rage with these re-recordings. Now, like Voivod, since these are re-recordings, I chose not to put them on a list of new releases on here, but they had to be mentioned because they were both so good. And I don't know if it's completely changed my opinion on re-recordings, but I think it opens the argument that if they are done well and there are certain ones where they felt like they could have done a lot better, I suppose I could allow it, especially if you get results like this. But yeah, both of these are absolutely fantastic. If you have not checked them out, you missed out and you need to go back and check them out because, yeah, I kind of recant my re-recording thing for at least these three releases I'm bringing up. Who knows, I might do that again if I hear re-recordings of this quality again. But I don't know, I feel like they kind of captured lightning in a bottle here. But yeah, check these both out. They're both absolutely amazing. All right, so let's kick off this list with number 40, and that is Birdflesh, Sickness in the North. I'm a giant grindcore fan. I love its tenacity, the explosive rage of just the style in general. But I also like levity, and as much as I listen to dark, sinister, gore-drenched material from a litany of bands, I love hearing humor injected into metal. I think often metal takes itself a little too seriously, so hearing a band come out and joke about the genre and even make some, interesting socio-political jabs in there with the humor, I think is kind of refreshing. And this band is absolutely brilliant at it. Well, this is definitely grindcore without a doubt. There are elements of crossover thrash on here. Like, this is like if SOD decided to go full bore grindcore. You still have lots of thrash riffs, some excellent grooves on here, but I mean, this is just blast beats, snarled vocals, and ridiculous songs. Now, we had the pleasure of actually sitting down with their guitarist Ellis and not only doing like an interview / discussion, we also went track by track on this album, going over what we thought were all 23 tracks. He even introduced us to a bonus track that is only on the digital version, and it was so worth it to go check that one out because it's absolutely hilarious. But we got to break down all these songs and you got to tell us all of the meanings behind them. Probably my favorite one in terms of like just the story behind it is the song Lose the Arise, which apparently was about one of the members on a school trip. He lost his copy of Sepultura's Arise and they wouldn't go back and get it. Honestly, I feel that song. I would have made the bus driver turn around, or, we would have ended up on the news. I would have ended up expelled and probably still grounded, honestly. But yeah, this album is fantastic from start to finish. It's silly, but it's also serious about just delivering quality grindcore. Number 40, Birdflesh. Check this band out. Pretty much everything I've heard by them rules. At number 39, we have The Ocean, or the Ocean Collective, Holocene. This one was a bit of a grower for me. Initially, I only gave it 3.5, but I kept coming back to it. And I will say, this is probably the most different album that this band has put out to date. Generally, their blend of prog and post-metal is just very heavy, and it's just a huge sound. And this one is a little bit more subdued, and honestly more driven by the lush synth work than it is the guitars all the time. It still definitely has its heavier moments on here, but a lot of this is, very calm and reflective, and then building into bigger, heavier moments later on. Songs like Atlantic and Subboreal are probably two of my favorite cuts this year. And honestly, while I don't focus on lyrics very often, I really got into the lyrical themes on here. This band has always had a cool theme about, evolution and life, and then extinction events, and then how that sort of ties into humanity. This is about humanity directly, and the lyrics are very poignant, sort of analyzing the current state we're in, and they really echoed a lot of the sentiments that I have about just life in general right now. And that sort of connection really drew me in more to the music, which initially I wanted something, much more along the lines of their last couple, especially Phanerozoic 1. That's still possibly my favorite album by The Ocean, but this one is definitely just kind of its own thing. It doesn't feel as though it's part of the more recent albums. This is a fresh chapter, and I'm really curious where it goes from here. And I'm really glad I gave it a chance because this is just a fantastic piece of work here. So yeah, if you have not checked out this one for whatever reason, strongly recommend it. It may not be as sonically heavy as some of their earlier works, but trust me, it's definitely heavy in a lot of other senses, so check it out. At number 38, we have Bacterial Husk, Anthropogenic Ruin. This is a more recent entry because I got this in a Metalhead box and I was flat out blown away. Honestly, this is possibly one of my favorite things the Metalhead box has given me. This is just flat out amazing death metal that is riff-centric and just tons of variety across the board in terms of song construction. You have that more thrashy Floridian style. You have more sludgy death metal with big bending, lurching riffs. You have awesome alternating high and low vocals and really interesting cosmic horror / sci-fi themes across the board. I was immediately gripped by the opening track Spores of Hallucinosis, not only because I'm definitely familiar with those spores, but also it just instantly reeked of amazing 90s death metal. And again, the creativity in the songs, their dynamics, I just think are flat out fun, and how the sci-fi elements are sort of kind of interwoven in there. It's kind of cosmic horror, but I don't know, it feels very sci-fi oriented with some of the samples and such that are on there. The corrupted hydrosphere, enshrined gravitational aberration. These guys clearly had a lot of fun with the song titles, but the music itself is just absolutely amazing. As I've been saying, if you're a death metal fan, this has been an awesome year, and believe me, we're going to get way more into that, but this was just an absolutely fantastic surprise. If you have not checked out this band yet, I strongly recommend it. This is their debut offering, so I am already stoked for future releases, and I believe this band is currently unsigned. So I really hope this band gets picked up and gets some wider distribution, because I really want more people exposed to this band. So yeah, number 38, Bacterial Husk, absolutely amazing band, great debut, hoping for a lot more from them in the future. At number 37, we have Obituary, Dying of Everything. I am a giant Obituary fan. They are one of the reasons why I got into death metal in general. And hearing this resurgence of, Obituary getting back to their old sound has been absolutely amazing. Their last album, their self-titled one, was fantastic. And I was really stoked to see what they would follow it up with. And honestly, they followed it up with another banger with possibly heavier, more dense production, more akin to their 90s material. This album packs everything that you love about Obituary. The swampy, dirty guitar tone, those sick grooves, and of course John Tardy's god-tier death metal vocals. I'm still such a huge fan of him. This album is pretty much packed with everything that probably we already love about Obituary, if we love Obituary, which I'm reasonably sure there's a lot of Obituary fans out there that watch our channel. You get some good kind of thrashy barn burners with Barely Alive and the title track. The Wrong Time, while I wasn't as big of a fan of it initially, has really grown on me. Like, that riff is just instantly catchy. And man, the last track, Be Warned, if you have ever wondered what Obituary would sound like as a death doom band, that is the track. That is such a monstrous closer. That huge bend in that main riff, ugh. It feels like the guitars are coming out of the speakers just to kind of like grab a hold of your throat. If you love Obituary, there's a damn good chance you got this. I thought this was an absolute banger. But, I mean, there's a lot of other death metal that came out that I thought was a little bit better. But yeah, Obituary rules, number 37, Dying of Everything. Absolutely kick-ass. At number 36, and this ought to be different because I actually have a vinyl for once, we have The Glorious Dead with Cemetery Paths. Now, I became familiar with this band mainly because I became familiar with one Marty Worm over at Heavy Metallurgy. It was a night of drinking on a live stream where he sent me a copy of his band's first album, and I was like, dude, this is flat out awesome. It's just old school 90s death metal. And when he said they were working on a second one, I was like, dude, I'm 100% down to check that out. And yeah, I think he even outdid the last album. This is flat out old school 90s death metal, very much in the vein of early Morbid Angel, but also, like a little bit of later Morbid Angel with Steve Tucker. The vocals in particular, I think, sound almost like Steve Tucker to a T. This is packed with just absolutely crushing, aggressive riffs. The songs Horizon of Ash, Gag on Viscera were giant standouts for me. Living Rot, Dragging the Dead. There's also a little bit of death doom that pops up on this album periodically too. And I know Marty's love of bands like Paradise Lost and My Dying Bride. So for me, it was kind of cool hearing, all the music that I know he's been influenced by because I've been watching his channel for years and hearing him talk about the albums he loves. It's cool hearing them also on here, like it's injected in their sound. And man, if you want just killer death metal riffs, this album is just flat out packed with them. Loved it from start to finish. Again, I'm a sucker for 90s death metal. That is where I cut my teeth on the genre. And yeah, they absolutely nailed it here. If you have not checked this out for whatever reason and you are a 90s death metal buff, you need to check it out because it is exactly like that. This is like a love letter to early 90s, even maybe some late 80s death metal. Check it out. Amazing album, number 36. At number 35, we have Memoriam, Rise to Power. I am a giant Bolt Thrower fan. Of course, everyone probably knows that by now. We pretty much name drop that band almost as much as we name drop Morbid Angel and Incantation on here. But initially, I kind of struggled with this band. Carl Willits definitely wanted to get that sort of Bolt Thrower sound going again, and initially kind of got off to kind of a lackluster start, but here over the course of the last 3 albums, I think he has really just honed in on that old school bowl thrower sound and added a lot of killer dynamics that maybe weren't there before in bowl thrower. This album explores more melodic death metal, also like death doom. You have Carl Willett's, iconic bowl thrower roars in there. The songs are still very much themed around war and all the atrocities that surround it. And I feel like this band on this album has pretty much got that sound nailed now. I loved the last one. I thought that was also great. I think this one is just a little bit more put together. Like everything is just tighter and more focused and more driven. The songs are catchier. The song Total War is such a giant standout for me. I love these syncopated chugs on the chorus, the more melodic death metal riffs that come in. It's a little bit faster and more urgent. All Is Lost is almost kind of a hardcore bruiser of a song. Like the grooves on that are just absolutely vicious. That main riff just is out to hurt you. I Am the Enemy is dark and somber and brooding. I absolutely love this album. I mean, I am a giant bowl thrower fan, but I don't know. It is good hearing this band really just start to come together. Like everything is really gelling for this band. And I think honestly, this might be their best release yet. So yeah, if you've been patiently waiting for this band to kind of get a little bit closer to that bowl thrower level of just awesomeness, I think they are pretty much there now. So yeah, number 35, Memoriam. Absolutely kick-ass album. At number 34, we have Godflesh Purge. Man, this was probably one of my favorite comeback albums this year. I've enjoyed Godflesh since they came back, especially A World Only Lit by Flame or Fire. I can't believe it's Flame or Fire. Either way, I enjoyed that album. I thought it was absolutely awesome. Post Self didn't do as much for me, but when this came out and when I heard some of the tracks leading up to it, it was like, man, this sounds like old Godflesh again. And honestly, this is kind of a return to like the first two albums, like Street Cleaner and Pure. This has that harsh, mechanical, dense, old school sound back to their minimalist riffs and interesting looped drum beats and just harsh bass and guitar tones. The vocals are just these big cavernous roars. I actually got to see this band on their US tour, which is still weird that I think the doors were at like 10:30 and the band didn't go on until midnight, but man, that show was absolutely amazing. It's harsh, minimalistic, but very powerful. Songs like Landlord and The Father, big standouts for me. I just love how cathartic the whole thing sounds. This is one of those albums where I didn't realize how much I missed this band's old sound until I heard them do it again, and I think this is absolutely on par with their earlier works. I remembered hearing that they were working on something last year, and I was like, okay, I mean, let's see what happens, because again, I wasn't the biggest fan of Post Self. I thought too much of the Jesu sound kind of worked its way into that, but man, this was just an absolute beast of an album. Everything I love about Godflesh pretty much on display once again on a fresh album, and yeah, they absolutely still crush it live. If you missed this one for whatever reason and you're just looking for something extraordinarily heavy, but heavy in kind of a different sense, check this out. Godflesh rules, and yeah, I'm absolutely stoked that I got to see them this year. That was a big bucket list band for me. But yeah, number 34, Purge, check it out. At number 33, we have Gorod The Orb. I am kind of hit or miss when it comes down to tech death these days. Like, I was a big fan of tech death earlier on, but now there's only a few bands that really just kind of hit that mark for me in terms of tech death, and Gorod has consistently been one of those bands. And this new album, I think, is absolutely fantastic. Not only because they do everything that I expect them to do in terms of their really lavish tech death, their constant use of tapping and melody and groove is always entranced me, because this is tech death that doesn't come across as very rigid. It's very fluid across the board, and again, absolutely loaded with melody. But this album, I feel like they're kind of shifting a little bit more into progressive death metal a bit. Like the title track has just amazing riffs and like really cool vocals on it. Like there's sort of this muffled kind of groaned clean singing on it. And it is more driven by big riffy hooks rather than the just techie noodling that you would kind of expect with tech death. Same thing with Savitri. I think that's how you say that word. It's more of a progressive death metal song in terms of how it's structured, but you still have all of the techie fun in terms of the wild polyrhythms and again, that frequent use of tapping, which they just know how to incorporate it in clever ways and really generate like memorable melodies, like the bridge on We Are the Sun Gods. That bridge in particular is awesome, how it starts off more subdued. You get this like kind of clean playing, this really cool drum beat, and then it continuously keeps building up with all the layers of guitars on it. And this still has a lot of that just absolutely awesome tech death sound that they are noted for. The opening track, which I'm not even sure I know how to pronounce, the Cremetheism, maybe? I don't know. Absolutely amazing blazing tech death, and Victory has some of the fastest picking I think I heard this year. Yeah, flat out this is amazing tech death / progressive death metal. I think there's an argument to be made that they're kind of moving more towards progressive death metal. These guys are absolute pros. Go see them live. I saw them live this year and my jaw nearly hit the floor with their just technical ability. And this is the second time I've seen them live and they sounded even tighter this time. Anyway, flat out amazing album. If you're a big fan of like Necrophagist, but you also want like a little bit of like progressive flavors in there too, you'll probably dig it. So check it out. At number 32, we have Enforced with War Remains. For me, this year wasn't as big in the thrash front, but that isn't to say there weren't some awesome thrash releases, and I was absolutely hyped for this one because their last album, Killgrid, absolutely blew me away. And this pretty much continues on with what they were doing on Killgrid, except I think they streamlined it even more, made it faster, made it more ruthless. This band's crossover style kind of borders on death metal at times. There's a death metal intensity to just kind of everything they do. But that thrash energy is felt. Like this whole album is designed to inspire mosh pits and chaos. And we actually got to see both of those things happen when we saw them at Full Terror Assault. That was an intense set. There isn't a moment on here where I'd say they hold back anything. Like this is kind of their Rain and Blood where they just kind of went for it on every track, like Hang By My Hand, the title track, Ultraviolence. Ultraviolence is short and just brutal as hell. There is not an ounce of mercy to be found on this album, but this is Enforced. I don't expect mercy. I expect sick riffs, larynx shredding vocals, and just unbridled intensity, and I got that on this entire album. Whatever fat they felt was on Killgrid, I think they trimmed it off on this one, and honestly, this is the one that just really captures them live. Like this is as close as you're going to get to seeing them live on a studio album so far, unless the next one's like even more batshit crazy, which I'm not going to put it past them. But yeah, pretty much if you love Power Trip, Slayer, and like, you know, kind of like death thrash too, kind of mixed in there, check this out. Absolute banger of an album. Check out all their albums. They're all fucking good in my opinion. But yeah, Enforced, number 32, amazing album. At number 31, we have Godthrymm's Distortions. One of my favorite doom metal / epic doom metal albums that came out this year. I was a big fan of their debut, but I think this is definitely the best offering so far. This band just knows how to make, I don't know, beautiful hooks out of just absolutely miserable, depressive music. Like this is such a sad listen, but at the same time it brings me a lot of nostalgic joy. Like there's a lot of nods to Candlemass and some really good nods to Typo Negative as well, with the lush synths and more atmospheric guitars. The song Devils in particular stood out to me as like more of a kind of up-tempo rocker. Like that main riff is just absolutely catchy as hell, but when you get down to songs like Obsess and Regress, Unseen, Unheard, man, that misery just kind of just comes crashing in, and you can just sort of feel it. Like it's like a cold, rainy day and your girlfriend broke up with you, your cat died, and your car won't start. Like it's kind of all those things just wrapped up into one. Like it's an absolutely giant size, depressing album that somehow soars a little bit in terms of like the melodies and harmonies in here, because I think the guitar work is just absolutely amazing. This is pure bummer music done so damn well. This is an absolutely amazing album. It is woefully epic, and that is the sort of thing that I look for in epic doom. Like, yeah, let's get sad, let's get, you know, bummed out, but let's make it like kind of like a big thing. Let's make it kind of grandiose, and this band absolutely nailed it. If you have not checked out this album for whatever reason, much like I say about all these albums because they're on my list, check it out. This is like one of the best doom metal albums I think that came out this year. Number 31, Godthrymm. At number 30, we have Tomb Mold, The Enduring Spirit. Probably one of the most divisive albums that came out this year, because this band kind of changed their sound. I've been a giant fan of this band for years since their debut, but Manor of Infinite Forms set kind of a whole new standard in death metal in terms of like that, you know, retro 90s old school death metal vibe. Like I definitely think this band was one of the catalysts for bringing that sound back. And Planetary Clairvoyance definitely, you know, kept going with that. But this album really just kind of came out of left field because, well, A, they barely announced it. Like, it just like, hey, guess what? New album comes out today. And we were like, oh my God, where have you been? And when we listened to it, this is definitely a lot different. Like, while you still have the heavy old school death metal tropes, this is almost bordering more on progressive death metal now. Like, there's a lot more like atheist and cynic vibes on here versus like their kind of old school like incantation and autopsy stuff that they did in the earlier years. Granted, you still get that, especially on like the first two tracks, The Perfect Memory, Phantasm of Aura, and Angelic Refractions, which I think is an absolute banger. But when you get down to Will of Whispers, and especially the last track, The Enduring Spirit of Calamity, man, these are huge songs with like lavish leads, really cool clean melodies, jazz fusion playing. I could not have predicted that they would have like shifted over to this stuff because, again, I was like gearing myself up for another absolute beatdown. But this band really stepped up their game, and honestly, to a degree, I really appreciate the shift because, yeah, they could have played it safe and put out another album similar to Manor of Infinite Forms or Planetary Clairvoyance. Probably done just fine, but they really wanted to strike out and do something different. And while this album definitely still packs a heavy death metal punch, there's more to it in terms of like repeat listens and such. Like, there's a lot more nuance. And I have to say, the lead playing on here is the best they've done to date. There's so much amazing guitar work on here that, again, like there were times where I kind of forgot I was listening to Tomb Mold. Not that their guitar work was bad before, it's just this is way more nuanced. Like, this is like jumping from Scream Bloody Gore to like Human. Now I know they got like a lot of flack, namely for the change, and then I guess they got flack for not wearing metal shirts on a Decibel album cover. Who fucking cares? But this band, I think, did a really good job here in terms of changing their sound and just evolving it overall, and still retaining a lot of the hallmarks of their earlier sound too, because you have the cavernous vocals, you have the pummeling drum work. It's still all there, you just have some new flavors on there as well. So yeah, you still love old school death metal. This has plenty of it on it, but again, there's a lot of other cool stuff going on here that you should definitely check out. But yeah, number 30, Tomb Mold. Way to go, guys. At number 29, we have Church of Misery, Born Under a Mad Sign. Another surprise release for me this year because I wasn't sure this band was doing anything. It had been a while since their last release, and they came out with an absolute banger. This is Japanese stoner doom that loves riffs almost as much as they love serial killers and mass murders, because that is always the theme on here. This is just Sabbath worship and sludge, and it is absolutely amazing. Every single song on here is just loaded with riffs, dense droning chugs. The bass tone on here is just ridiculous. Vocals that go from snarling to crooning. Everything is just kind of like rough and dirty sounding, and well, I mean, it's just all about riffs. And again, like serial killers and mass murderers. The opening track, Beltway Sniper, which is John Allen Muhammad, and they actually pepper in nice touches of atmosphere about the whole news excerpts about the guy just randomly shooting people just because reasons. I don't know. It was absolute lunatic, I guess. And Come and Get Me Sucker, which is about David Koresh and his fun little cult that went up in flames. But I have to say the song Most Evil about Fritz Harman, which I believe is the gentleman on the cover here with the very, very unpopular mustache. That one is one of my absolute favorite songs here. It is just slow, doomy. The riffs are insanely heavy. I mean, I could probably say the same thing about most of these songs, but there are some good like up-tempo jams in terms of like just, it's like a little bit more like that, you know, kind of like desert punk sound that kind of works its way in. But most of this is just doom and sludge and riffs, and it's absolutely amazing from start to finish. I've had an absolute ball jamming this. Like, this is just such a good listen across the board. If you're a big fan of bands like Mono Lord and Truck Fighters, and you just wish they would talk about serial killers a little bit more, check this out. Check out, like, all of Church of Misery. Like, I love this band. Like, all of their releases, I think, are just absolutely solid. So yeah, Church of Misery, number 29. Check it out. At number 28, we have Rotten Sound's Apocalypse. Apocalypse is definitely the right name for this album. This is 18 tracks in 21 minutes, and it is probably the most violent grindcore album I've heard this year. I'm pretty sure I've said at some point that this band is almost the spiritual successor to Nosum. They play intense, fast-paced grindcore. The songs are just explosions of violence with nasty riffs, blast beats, groove, and shrieked vocals. This is everything I love about grindcore pretty much on one album. And this band is unbelievably consistent. They have their sound locked in, and I think this album is just about as concise and as brutal as this band could possibly get. This is an absolute no-breaks run of an album. You barely have time to catch your breath in between tracks because it is just beating after beating. You have moments of groove every now and then, but that generally just goes right back in the blasts and just the absolute ferocity of this album. I love the fact that they rock a flat-out HM2 gnarly buzzsaw tone throughout all this that adds a level of heaviness that I don't know if it's necessarily needed for grindcore, because grindcore is already like just insanely heavy, but with that HM2 tone, it is absolutely lethal. Both of the Bliss tracks, both Suburban Bliss and Digital Bliss, I think are giant standouts. But honestly, I can't think of a song in here I didn't like. I mean, Sharing was a good standout, Nothingness, like they're all really good. They're all just honed in, and like for me, being a grindcore fan, this is exactly what I want. Like I just want it fast, furious, angrier and shit, and I don't want any breaks along the way. Like this is just like a boulder rolling down a hill onto an unsuspecting village full of innocent people minding their business. It just comes and destroys everything, and then it's on to the next town. They should probably describe their next tour as that. Like that is kind of accurate in terms of their sound. It is a sonic assault at all times, and I absolutely love Rotten Sound. And man, I don't know if this is a new favorite in terms of their back catalog, because again, I love like all their albums, but this is an absolute beast of an album. If you're a grindcore fan and you're just looking for something absolutely relentless, I mean, if you're a grindcore fan, that's kind of generally what you're looking for anyway. Check this out. Absolutely monstrous album. Number 28, Rotten Sound, get it. At number 27, we have Cannibal Corpse, Chaos Horrific. No surprise Cannibal Corpse is on here. I love Cannibal Corpse, and I was just talking about consistency in terms of a band's works, and well, Cannibal Corpse is like the definition of consistency. I can't think of an album I don't like, and that now includes this one. I also think there's some improvements on this one from Violence Unimagined, which I think Violence Unimagined was higher on my list last year, but that should tell you what I think about this year in terms of like all the death metal releases, because we still have a lot of death metal to go. I really think that Rob and Eric are gelling in terms of like a guitar tandem, and I like the fact that you're hearing more of Eric's writing style in here, especially on the last track, Drain You Empty, which almost has like some doomy epic qualities to it. Absolute monster track. But man, Bloodblind might be one of the catchiest songs they have written here recently. Like that riff just sounds amazing. Like that is an instant brutal hook. Pretty much everyone on here is just killing it. I mean, like Corpse Grinder sounds amazing still. Every song feels urgent, explosive, and again, I feel like this is a little bit more straightforward, and I think it gels a little bit better than the last one overall. This is why Cannibal Corpse is still a staple in death metal, because of their consistency. Like they keep churning out albums that still sound fresh and volatile and just heavier than hell. This is Cannibal Corpse once again. They nailed it. Another thing that I also like about this is the artwork. The artwork feels like it is a throwback to their earlier albums. Like all their artwork's still done by Vincent Locke, but his more recent ones kind of have taken more of a comic book approach, which I know he's a comic book illustrator, but this kind of feels like, you know, at least some of the stuff from like that 90s era in terms of like the colors and, you know, lack of like more hard lines you see in comic books. But yeah, Cannibal Corpse flat out rules. They nailed it once again. That was pretty much what I was expecting. This is another banger from Cannibal Corpse. Honestly, what did you expect at this point? I expect a solid Cannibal Corpse album every time they put out an album, and so far they have yet to disappoint me. So yeah, Cannibal Corpse number 27. Good shit once again. And to cap off this section of my list, I'm going to maybe put an asterisk on this one. I don't know. I am going with Ulthar, both Anthronomicon and Helionomicon, because they released these at the same time as two separate albums, but in theory, I would say this is definitely a double album. I don't care. I'm counting them both because they're both absolutely amazing. And honestly, I think it's the best thing that this band has put out so far. This is some of the riffiest blackened death metal I have heard this year. The guitar work just twists and weaves and churns all around these songs. The dynamics are just insane at times. They're wild transitions and crazy drum work. And I like the fact that both of these are different. Like, Anthronomicon is kind of more what I would expect from this band, albeit done probably at the best level so far. The songs are riffy, just nasty sounding from start to finish with their like cavernous, screamed vocals. The atmosphere is on point. The Lovecraftian themes, of course, are all over the place. But it's that insane riff work that is all over this album. Now, Helionomicon is definitely riffy as hell, but it is only 2 tracks and 2 of the longest tracks that they have written. Both of them, I believe, around the 20-minute mark. In fact, I think one might be a little bit longer than 20 minutes. And almost kind of goes a little bit proggy, but in their way. Like, it's still dark and haunting and foreboding, but also like riffy and aggressive. It doesn't come across as pretentious or needlessly long. Like, in fact, the songs really do flow well as longer songs. They don't necessarily drag. But overall, for both, I would say it's the songwriting. These guys craft just amazing songs, and if you are a riff fanatic, you will probably love these if you haven't already heard them. So both of these are my number 26. I'm counting them as one. It is technically a double album. They just released them separately, but like, again, on the same date. I don't know. Either way, it's amazing. And if you have not checked out this band yet, I strongly recommend both of these releases. And honestly, I recommend any of their other stuff, but I would say like this is the best yet. So Ulthar, number 26, check them both out. All right, and that knocks out part 1 of my top 40 for 2023. Next one will be 25 through 11, and then we'll have the top 10. So there are plenty of awesome releases still to go in here because, again, this was just such an awesome year, and I'm looking forward to going over all of those here very shortly. In fact, they'll probably be up like, I don't know, the following day. But of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there as well as on our channel. But if you're looking for Thralls merch, like t-shirts and hats, we have both of those there. So if you're interested in any of that, click the link down below. And of course, thank you guys. It has been another awesome year just in terms of doing this channel, and you guys are large in part the reason why, because our fans are absolutely awesome. You guys have stuck with us for so long, and it's amazing seeing new fans come up. It's awesome talking to you guys at the shows and talking in the comments. Yeah, this whole thing has been an amazing ride, and we have a ton of stuff planned for you. After lists, of course, we got more rankings. We got some retro reviews we want to do. I got some other things that I'm working on as well. So yeah, we're going to overload you with content just like we always do. So once again, thank you all so much, and we will catch you later.